Thank you, Tracy. Okay, I'm going to try and set up my timer, if the phone agrees. I'd like to start with a little quiz, and as I understand it, Stacy has agreed to chip in a little prize for the winner. So you have to be ready. I'm sorry, but the InsurTech Hartford staff, I don't feel that it would be appropriate to involve InsurTech Hartford, but you're not a member of the staff. You're pitching, you're in the game. You're in the game. You can win. Tonight, you can win. So the prize is going to be 2 tickets for the next InsurTech Hartford event. Okay? So I think it's around $40 value, $50. So good value. So let's get right into it. To win tonight, and the people who were here at the lunch session obviously already know the answer, I'm afraid, so that doesn't count. Sorry. But for those of you who weren't at the lunch event, question. Do you know what this is? And before anybody answers, I need you to be really specific, okay? So, for example, it's a picture, that wouldn't qualify as a good answer. What is this? Does anyone here know what this is? I have one hand raised over there.
So, I think...
You think?
I think it's a fire mark.
Ooh!
And I believe it's
More?
also from the Philadelphia contribution chip. Which one?
Philadelphia contribution chip? I'm afraid you're only half right. So, just for cultural purposes, the Philadelphia contributorship was founded, among others, by Benjamin Franklin. This is not the fire mark of that company, but it is a fire mark, so you got half of the answer. Is anyone here? Yes, sir. Wow, you got it. So you won. So why don't you stand up and let's give you a round of applause. What's your name? Who do you work for?
My name is Raj. I work for Accenture. I work as a business analyst in the insurance industry. Yeah.
Fantastic, Raj. So I think you can redeem your prize with Stacy after the event, and welcome on board. So you're exactly right. This is the original fire mark for the 3rd oldest fire insurance company in the U.S., which is called the Baltimore Equitable Fire Insurance Company. The Philadelphia contributorship was the oldest, actually, the first in the U.S., founded much earlier, actually, by Ben Franklin. They have a comparable fire mark, but it has 4 hands. This one has 2, and you'll see in a second why I chose this one for this talk. Originally, the fire marks were there to, signify the contract, or some would say the partnership, between the insurer and the insured. And these would be affixed on the buildings that the company would insure. These days, a similar symbol is being used to designate another partnership which is emerging in the industry between human and machine through the use of AI. So the goal of my talk today is to go through 3 hot spots that we've run into in the insurance industry and share with you some of these key applications that we've seen in the market over the past 2 years. Expert System is not a newcomer in the AI space. We're focused on the part of AI that deals with natural language. It's called natural language processing. So we don't handle images, we don't handle video, we only handle text. But as it happens, insurance has a lot of text going around, and it's a great opportunity for these technologies. So I'm going to share with you the top 3 applications that we've run into, namely claims, underwriting, and customer interaction. These are the 3 hotspots that we see in the market today. I'm going to share examples of some of these projects that we work on. You'll see specific examples. Here we have a claims in bodily injury claims application. We deal with all sorts of claims, not only bodily injury, but for the purposes of today's talk, I'm taking concrete examples. What the technology does, very in brief terms, is to read these documents automatically. It reads medical reports. This is a report that's written by a physician following a person's accident. It could be a hospital discharge record. It could be an ambulance bill. It could be a description of the accident coming from the police department. It could be all sorts of documents in a claim. The platform that we provide reads these claim documents automatically and recognizes concepts that are used in there. So By concepts, I mean, for example, the name of the claimant, the number of the claim, the date of the accident, name of the parties involved, attorneys, medical service providers, and so on, and all sorts of other information that characterize, in the case of bodily injury claims, the nature of the injuries, the nature of the treatments, drug names, dosages, and so on and so forth. All of this information is harvested for, first of all, the purpose of routing these documents to the right claim handler and the right team. Depending on the type of claim, it might be a different line of business. It might be a separate team handling high severity claims, for example, or low severity claims. And we also flag aspects such as, in this case, pre-existing conditions, which are an important aspect of bodily injury claims, as you know, as well as inconsistencies in the file if we can locate any. All this information is the typical information that's used in the claims process to ultimately take a decision. And essentially what we try to do is make the claim handler's time much easier so that they don't have to flip through all these documents and spend hours doing it. The platform does that for them. They can focus on the higher added value parts of their job, namely taking decisions. So this is extracted from a Zurich presentation from last year where they shared with their investors some of the metrics that they measured in the context of a claims automation project. I think in this project, on average, the claims took 3 hours of claim handling. They reduced the ancillary task of going through the documents from 58 minutes to 5 seconds. So essentially that part of the process, they were successful in quasi-automating that process on average on the claim process. Tremendous time savings, from an FTE standpoint. It's a very significant impact. Also an impact in terms of savings on the payouts because they were able to standardize payouts in a process where typically they were going against guidelines but not really very strictly implemented guidelines. So this process enabled them to better control essentially the payouts as well. On the customer side, the acceleration of the claim process is obviously a key benefit for customers. So they were really pleased with how this project went. That's the first category of a project that we see again and again across lines of business, accelerating claims. Here's a second example in the arena of underwriting. Here is an example based on property insurance, essentially fire insurance for industrial locations. This is a risk report, which in this case was produced by Marsh. Typically, these risk reports are produced by third parties who have the ability to locally visit these facilities and essentially analyze risk factors, risk mitigation factors in these areas. So what our platform does is, again, read these documents automatically, piece together the information, and in this case, what we built was with business rules that we developed with the customer. The platform is actually going all the way to grade the risk level in these facilities. So if you think of the risk engineers, if you think of the underwriters, the time that they spend flipping through these reports and grading the risk levels, the platform does that quasi-automatically, so that saves a lot of time for the risk engineers, helps them focus maybe on the thorniest aspects of these cases rather than the more mundane aspects. So again, time savings, consistency in terms of risk grading, and accelerating the quote process. In this case, the customer, the insurer customer who was leveraging our platform was working through brokers, and essentially the metric that mattered to them was accelerating the quote process to provide a better experience to brokers. This is a second, I would say, fairly typical category of process where we accelerate underwriting. Again, it's across lines of business. This is just an example in fire insurance, but very similar trends are playing out in other lines of business as well. Lastly, customer interaction, typically hundreds of thousands to millions of calls, emails, questions asked every year, and the old methods have their limits, and the new generations of customers are asking for a more responsive experience. So what we do is typically deploy this technology in a variety of processes. Could be email classification, where we're able to essentially recognize the request at hand quasi-automatically and route as a function of the contents of these emails. Obviously, there's a minority of requests that are very exotic, that are not going to be automated, but also there's a lot of very mundane requests that lend themselves to a lot of automation. And in the areas where we're working currently, we feel that 70% typically of these requests can be considered mundane, and therefore can be modeled, and therefore also can be very well automated. Chatbots are a big part of this area of our business, social customer service, as it's called. And overall, the impact of this technology, really in terms of time savings, in the range of 20 to 30% on typical numbers that we're seeing. So shorter response times for customers and an improved customer experience are the key metrics here. Also, some benefits in terms of reallocating FTEs, but mostly on the customer satisfaction side is where we're seeing the impact for customers. So that's it. I wanted to recap with these three categories of projects that we're dealing with, and also mention these are some of the lines of business that we deal with. I haven't put life insurance there, but it's also an area where we see a lot of demand. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer maybe a couple before we finish. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I'm going to give you the microphone so everybody can hear you.
Does the technology deal with handwriting?
So we don't deal with handwriting. We have partners who do. There's a limited number of companies in the market who specialize in handwriting recognition. So you deal with a lot of handwritten content? Contracts, claims?
Doctors or brokers writing on documents, that's part and parcel of the complexity.
What about the structured data? Unstructured data. Yeah, we deal entirely with unstructured data. So unstructured data is kind of a large category in which you can find all sorts of different assets. Text is one of them, images as well, sound. So we deal with the text part, and for other categories of content, there's other technology providers out there. Yeah.
What other formats do you work with, like PDF? Is there anything besides Word or email?
So I think we handle something like 250 formats, of which most of us don't know 200 of them. And most of us are familiar with, most of the common, let's say, desktop publishing formats. But there's all sorts of exotic stuff. PDF is very common. Word documents, Excel documents. The best case is XML, but there aren't that many insurance policies in XML, I think. So, we have to deal with what we get. Last question? Last question? Yes, sir.
How do you handle liability with your models?
In terms of our liability? Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think it's a question. There's a gentleman here, I don't know if I see him, who was here at lunch, with whom we were briefly discussing that, and it's a key issue in the industry, as we go forward, deploying these platforms. One of the ways of answering your question is that I think for regulatory reasons, most of our customers are not seeking to fully automate because there needs to be a human in the loop. And for the time being, the way the liability is handled is that it's the insurer's responsibility to ensure that cases are processed according to the industry's norms. So we don't take on that liability at this stage. I think going forward, as more automation participates in these processes, there might be areas where straight-through processing will happen, and then the industry will have to come up with maybe new rules, and that might mean that we would take on some of that responsibility. But for the time being, it's not the case. Yeah. And we do apply business rules that come from our customers. So those are our customers' criteria playing out there. So it's not our criteria. Thanks for the question. Yeah. All right, I think we can, another question.
Quick one, just wondering how many clients you have now and what the average implementation effort is like.
That's a hard question to answer fully. We're working with about 1 out of 3 of the top worldwide insurers, top 25, 1 out of 3. These are very large companies, obviously, so we're only working in certain lines of business. In terms of implementation time, that depends on the project, but you can get started with maybe a small pilot over the period of a month. Maybe a pilot project is going to take 3 months, and then a full-fledged implementation is going to take anywhere from, let's say, 1 year to 2 years, depending on the scope. Those are some of the numbers. Sure. All right. Thank you very much.